If you do research on what the problems of the consumer are, it's down to you, the innovators and the brands, to understand those problems and then execute. So I think good research leads to unique insight, leads to better decisions, which leads to a better brand.
We are here with Charlie and Rónán, the co-founders of Bounce Insights. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So I want to know about all you guys are building in the media and marketing space, how you guys are innovating on a very legacy industry. Before we get into that, I want to know a little bit about you. Can you let me know where you're from and kind of what you're doing today?
Sure, yeah. I'm from Dublin. I grew up there, live there now. Most of our team is there. That's our headquarters. And then I'm the co-CEO alongside Charlie, so responsible for finance and technology mainly, alongside the strategy.
Yeah, and I'm Charlie. He builds it, I try and sell it. So kind of classic founder duo. We met in university in Dublin, so I'm from Ireland as well. Currently living in New York and spent 16 months before that in London. So I kind of move around with where our business is. And yeah, I handle all things commercial and trying to convince people to use our product, which I think is pretty good.
Very cool. Can you guys walk me through exactly what Bounce offers for your clients today?
Yeah, so we're a consumer research platform. We help brands understand their consumers so they can just make better decisions faster. Market research at its core is just a greater understanding of the consumer. The classic example is Jeff Bezos says that they keep a chair empty in every room to represent the consumer. I suppose Bounce tries to fill that chair in every marketing category or commercial team in brands. And we do that through surveys online, as well as knowledge management, which is effectively just telling them what they already know about their data. So the combination of AI in those two areas means that you can get it faster, better, and cheaper. Makes research a bit more accessible instead of just being a thing that big companies do when they have a lot of money.
Yeah. How exactly are you guys conducting this research? Who are these surveys going out to? How are you gathering the data?
Yeah, so we go out to any consumer that brands might want to speak to. Usually that's in the Western world for the brands that we work with, so North America, Europe. And then how we conduct it is we use AI to design the research. We gather the data using our proprietary technology, and then we use AI to analyze that data as well. And then we've started layering on top knowledge management, or retrieval as we call it, where we analyze secondary data as well for the brands. So they can give us some of the data they already have, we gather some new data, and then analyze it all using AI.
And in terms of accessing the consumers, it's very simple, like invitation, good experience, and incentive system. So if you want to speak to 500 tequila drinkers in Germany or 100 software engineers in Mexico, we go out sourcing those people, inviting them into the experience, asking them their opinion, tracking their time in the survey to make sure that they're paying attention, verify they are who they say they are, and then we capture all of that data and collate it. So the same way that you try and predict an election, you need a statistically significant sample size. We bring that kind of research lens in quite a simple way to a lot of the brands, so that if they're making a decision on should we go with packaging A or packaging B, you should know what do the consumers think. And there's a common misconception by a lot of kind of tech founders that, oh, well, market research is silly because consumers don't know what they want. But I actually think that it's this idea that you're not doing good research, because if you do research on what the problems of the consumer are, it's down to you, the innovators and the brands, to understand those problems, understand those jobs to be done, and then execute. So I think good research leads to unique insight, leads to better decisions, which leads to a better brand. It's kind of a simple train of thought.
And is it that like this package versus this package that you are gathering data on, or what are the different metrics that you guys are finding out about?
Yeah, we do a bunch of different stuff. So we do pack testing, we do NPD, we do usage and attitudes, we do innovation, brand tracking, all of the above.
Are there any major differences between generations, locations? Like, how are you guys thinking about demographic as you're gathering this data?
So hugely so. So the classic in market research is like your age, gender, region, social grade way of predicting how people will act. But a big change that's happening is kind of the individualization of every consumer. So let's say, for example, myself and Rónán could fall into the exact same category for a survey. Similar age, similar background, similar earnings, whatever it might be. But myself and Rónán, if you did know us, we make such drastically different decisions around brands and what we care about. And I think when it comes to surveying and identifying an audience, it's the personalization. So yes, you can start with age, gender, region, social grade as like a starting point, but understanding what brands I buy, why I buy them, what I care about, you know, my brand affinity or my brand equity. I think understanding that, and from the brand point of view, when you're then surveying me or asking my opinion, it's connected more to proper customer segmentation. So we're trying to get out of this very old school way of thinking within market research, both in the technology, with how we treat the respondents, but also in terms of how we understand and collate the wider data set. It's just bringing kind of a modern approach to it. and making it a bit more general. So Rónán mentioned we do quite a lot of types of research, but if you think about it, the area we're trying to fill is the information gap or question that arises in a given day-to-day environment in a brand where they don't understand something fully, and then we want to have the idea of, well, let's bounce, like let's get an idea, let's just get a piece of insight that helps us make that decision. And that's all we're really doing, and we just use research to do that.
How did you guys realize that this was something that needed innovation? What about the industry, what about your experiences inspired this?
Yeah, well, we didn't have a huge amount of industry experience at the time. I mean, I was studying computer science. Charlie was in global business. We were both in university, knocking heads. We started as a consumer panel company, so we were trying to solve the problem of engagement in like survey responses. We did a really good job of that in Ireland, and then we realized that globally it was difficult to scale, but also not as big a problem. There was great panels all over the world. So we started working with Tesco and Diageo closely in understanding what problems they specifically had in those markets, and really it was focused around speed and then the quality of the insight that they got at the end. So we started layering in our AI technology to design the research, gather the data, and analyze that insight.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you're better off being lucky than good, and we found ourselves in an industry which was dominated by repeatable human tasks. There's this feeling of, no one ever got fired for using IBM, no one ever got fired for using Ipsos or the market research agency in that local market. So there's that feeling, because when people are buying data, they're usually buying trust and comfort in a decision. They're not actually truly buying the insight. So we found ourselves in an industry that was dominated by like very talented, expensive and experienced humans doing every task, which meant it was kind of ripe for disruption. But like that wasn't any sort of like business strategy plan. We kind of fell into an industry, and the more we kind of went into it, the more we realized it lacked a lot of technology, first principles thinking. It was filled with exceptional people that we felt weren't giving themselves enough credit. Market researchers would scream and not be listened to. And I think we are trying to elevate them to the C-suite in terms of the types of decisions. Like every senior person in a brand or every junior person in a brand should be able to get research. But before we entered the space, it felt quite inaccessible. And truly, it was just expensive. So only the big brands did it. But if you were a challenger brand trying to come into the market, you would spend all your money on advertising and no money on understanding why are people buying or how are people buying. So it's smarter use of money. So that's where we're trying to really change the thinking around the industry.
Yeah, and the people working in insights are amazing strategists. Like they understand their brands really well. They understand the problems their brands have really well, but they're having to spend hours every week trying to pick the perfect question to reach the right consumer, which really isn't a problem that they need to be solving. They want to be looking at their brand, and then we take it from there.
Yeah, and you say that, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. You fell into this, but you can only fall so far. Like you then have to start building. So what were some of the steps that you guys took to then realize this is an issue that I'm seeing here, an untapped part of the market? How can we build a full-fledged business around this?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have a philosophy that we speak about a lot now around listen, sell, build. It's this idea that, and the reason why we now know this is because we failed excessively and continuously for many years at not doing this. So this is me trying to convince myself to take the own advice. But this concept of listen, sell, build is truly listening to your customers' problems. So we mentioned Diageo and Tesco and Coca-Cola. Some of these early brands, we just sat and listened to them and spoke to them and tried to get to the crux of what the actual problem is. Then we actually tried to sell them the solution before we built it. So the idea of people will say they like something, the book, The Mom Test, this idea of like, people will really want you to succeed. So they'll tell you stuff that isn't true. But if they will part with money or they'll invest their time and money into something, you'll know it's actually solving a problem. And then it's built. Totally. So this idea of myself and Rónán's on the technical side, I was on the customer side, and we would just spend so much time understanding why market research agencies weren't solving their problem. And when it came to building, it was this idea of co-creation. So you kind of build it piece by piece, you figure out the pricing model piece by piece. And I think one of the things that startups have that big companies don't is agility and proximity to customer. Like if you can truly sit there and listen to them and they tell you what they want, and in our industry, they were begging for something better. It was all about execution from there. And the last few years have just been about kind of keeping that DNA while scaling and trying to get it to as big a scale as we can, with the idea that every decision in a brand is backed by insight. And we just want to increase the percentage of decisions that are made with bounce data. That's kind of the ultimate vision of the company.
So he's promising things and then handing it off to you to figure out,
exactly.
Right?
And COVID made that much harder, because to start with, we'd be at a table and there'd be a client that'd be kicking at me. That's not possible, like, don't do that. And then over Zoom,
Exactly.
So yeah, we had to just deliver.
Luckily, he's exceptionally technically. So I would, if I was did the problem, like here is the problem, and I think this is the solution, and we have someone who will buy it. That's a good motivator. We have 2 other co-founders, Josh and Brandon, who aren't with us today, but Josh, Brandon, and Rónán are just some of the most intelligent, like commercially orientated product people that I've ever met, that it just makes my life so easy that I'm sitting there with a client and I just know I'm offloading a unique problem that is technically complex, but they are like commercially so empathetic that we will win just purely based on that. So I think that whole part of the early years was just so fun because we just backed ourselves so much to do what no one else was doing, and that was like our only thing going for us. Everything else is so hard in a startup. So
yeah, definitely. When you were having those early conversations, deciding like, okay, what are the actual pain points here? What were some of those that you guys came upon that you started to innovate for?
So the really big thing in the early days was speed, right? So right now the research process, if you use humans for the whole process, which most brands do, it takes about 4 to 8 weeks to get from I have a problem, I have an information gap, and then I now have the insight to go and act on that. For us, that takes about 24 to 48 hours, and that was a step 2 process. Like we started out, like I was saying, with Tesco and Diageo, and we were able to turn around data in kind of 7 to 10 days just because we had 3 engineers who were nerds and wanted to automate things and didn't want to take lots of time, and they were like, don't worry about that panel thing. You guys can deliver insight in 7 to 10 days. That's amazing. Double down on that. So yeah, really stepping up the automation and then stepping up the AI was like the early innovation to that speed.
And I think the speed is almost like the Trojan horse. Like speed gets us in the door with brands, but actually coming back to that idea that people are buying comfort, now there's a real drive to the quality of insight. And what that isn't, that's not just like the quality of the consumers who are giving their opinion, and it's actually like the first principles understanding of what is the original problem and then tying that to the insight at the end. Because I'm using a lot of analogies now, but the people want a 1/4-inch hole, not a 1/4-inch drill. So when someone comes to you with a problem, they don't care how you really get them there. So we, like 24 to 48 hours is exceptional. It's taken us years to get to that level of speed. But actually it's 24 to 48 hours too slow. People say, like, if you asked our clients now, they would say, I want to be in a meeting, get asked a question as to what should we do, and be able to pull the insight from what we already know. Like, there's so much research out there already. There's so much data out there already. The speed at which we can access and understand that data and then only run new research on where there is gaps, that's the way research has to go if it's going to have any chance of competing at the highest kind of decisions in these brands.
Yeah, and that's why there's lots of excitement around our retrieval engine, so that kind of secondary data analysis, knowledge management piece, because you don't need to wait to go and gather data and wait for the turnaround for those responses. You can just mine your existing data and get an answer to a question in that meeting with that stakeholder.
Right. And how are your then users receiving this data? How, like, from you guys aggregating it to it being in front of them, what does that process look like?
So from the client side or on the consumer side? On the client side, it's in a perfect process. And this is the thing about how software is changing. They would not even interact with the software. There is a world in which they could email us a problem. That problem gets like automatically ingested into our system. We tell them what they already know. It does a gap analysis. They email us saying, yes, I want to trigger that new research to run that new survey to capture the data. And then we use AI to basically perform all the survey analysis and like summarize what it means, the so what. And that so what could get sent straight back to them without logging into a platform. This idea of, in the early days, we were too obsessed with the platform. We were so obsessed with how amazing it looked, all it could do, when you realize that the way most people want to interact is without change. They want to send a problem and then get a solution. They want to ask a question and then get an answer and then show your homework. So if you get questioned on why are you making that decision, you can go, oh, well, here's the analysis that I didn't do, but someone else has done for me. So I think, funnily enough, it sounds counterintuitive, but I would be really happy if sometimes people didn't even use our product. They just came to us with a problem. Now, right now, how it actually works is, they do look at the survey in the system and they make sure it's all good, and they look at the insights in the dashboard, and the best users will go in and like interrogate it further and create their own custom charts and personalize it to that brand. But I mean, that's for the power users, and I think we actually need to lift the floor so that like non-research savvy or non-data experts can engage and have insight at their fingertips. Like, that's what winning feels like to me, not just making the existing research that bit more productive. So it's kind of stepping into changing the industry in my mind.
The way that you get there is through that double clickable piece that Charlie was talking about. Like, you need every piece of insight to be verifiable and like to have the backing behind it, right? Like, you can't just go to your boss and go, we should go with color X instead of color Y.
Well, that's what I tried.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you need to have the backing behind it, and because we have that, we're starting to build that trust with some of our customers, where they just give us a problem, we give them the insight.
Totally. In terms of the marketing industry in general, obviously consumer insights are critical in successful marketing campaigns. In practice, what has the success looked like for your clients and the ways that they're able to reach their target audiences?
Well, I think the frustrating thing for a company like ours is that we're like not connected to the outcome of the decisions right now. Like if I'm being honest, the dream for any business is how many decisions were made with bounce data and then how did they perform versus if they didn't or a competitor who doesn't. We can't get that data right now. It's like a real like frustration of ours because that's what you would ultimately want. Right now, I think there's a real push with AI around like it's just gonna be faster, better and cheaper. You used to be able to choose 2, now you can have 3. But actually it's way more interesting instead of being a cost play that we can move into, oh, you made this decision with bounce and that led to more revenue, more category, a better campaign. And it's actually quite tricky for us at the moment to say, oh, Coca-Cola succeeded or Mondelez succeeded or eBay succeeded because of using bounce. Like right now we're more of an efficiency play just because of our proximity there. But we have kind of big plans on figuring out how can we connect the actual outcomes from those decisions because our hypothesis is that people who are closer to their consumers and make decisions with insight become better brands. And I suppose it's difficult for us to actually go out and prove that now.
Yeah, exactly. We're stepping to it, right? Like we started out as just providing panel and then we stepped up a level in the value chain to actually running the surveys for them. We've stepped up again now to doing secondary and primary data. And then what you're talking about, what Charlie's talking about, is when you layer in predictions. So you're able to predict different outcomes and go, okay, you will generate this much more revenue or this much more sales or this much more units purchased, depending on which tactic you take. So that's really exciting for us. It's coming down the line over the next couple of years.
And the other thing as well is like all of our research is so confidential. Like if you think about it, we're doing like innovation and new product research for these exceptional brands that like, it's so funny, I'd be in meetings and they're like, oh, can you talk me through your use cases? And I'm like, I can't because I'm under NDA and we're working with so many competitive brands because because we understand the category and how it works. So it's really funny, we both can't connect to the decisions sometimes and are under such confidentiality that we're like, you just got to trust us. We're really good, which is difficult from a commercial perspective. But luckily, some of our clients allow us to share some stuff after it launches.
What have been technically some of the challenges, but also the opportunities that you're seeing, especially how much is changing with AI so quickly? What are you seeing from a technical side of things?
Yeah, so definitely the advent of large language models that really accelerated our progress. Like we've been AI first since the start. We built our own AI models and our own AI algorithms to run and automate our technology. But all of a sudden, you now have LLMs behind the scenes that are kind of like the engine or the platform that you're building on top of, and the rate of innovation of those is incredible. So we're layering that into our survey design, into our analysis, but we get that automatic improvement because we build what we call LLM ops, where basically we are able to, whenever a new model comes out, we test it against all the other models based on the data we're using, and whichever one performs best, we hotspot in. So we get this constant automatic innovation without having to invest in it ourselves. So that's been incredible and really accelerated us kind of maybe 2 years ago.
I think that's like the way I think about it is that the problem hasn't changed in what we're trying to solve, just the tools we are using to deliver the solution has changed quite a lot. So we were trying to do a lot of this ourselves. It was really difficult because we were trying to like, okay, how do we do survey design using technology instead of people? Like that was a highly complex problem to try and figure out. And then suddenly you could like fine tune a model to try and replicate how do you design a survey? What does a good survey look like? And how can you retrieve that? Similar on the analysis. So it's accelerated kind of our journey towards our desired outcome. And that's been just, as I said, sometimes you're better off being lucky and good than good. Timing matters a lot with companies. And when the AI kind of wave and then when things started to improve, we found ourselves with a foundational set of customers. You know, we were profitable, making quite a lot of money for our size, and we're able to like invest quickly, be agile with our clients so that they could test and co-create stuff with us and try and solve actual problems with AI. Whereas there's a lot of kind of, as you say, hype and what does it actually do for me? And yeah, it's kind of a better search. You know, that's kind of what people materialize it as. Whereas for us, we were able to go very practically with solutions to everyday problems, and they just want us to use it. Like they still want the same problem solved. However, whatever technology we use to solve it, they don't really mind. And I think that's kind of an important thing for me on the commercial side, because people are a bit scared of it, going, oh, well, if I open the door, are you going to run through and then suddenly I don't have a job? Whereas it's actually just a means to solving the problem for us.
With regard to the future of the marketing industry and how you guys are kind of coming into it from the tech side of things, what are any predictions that you have about how brands are going to innovate on the ways that they're touching their customers, the way that they are reaching their customers, and how they're marketing within the next, like, let's say 5 years?
Yeah, well, I suppose our vision is that every decision in a brand is made based on insight, and that's not possible currently because just the resources needed to be able to make every decision based on insight is almost impossible. But the speed at which we're able to turn natural language into research is accelerating as well. So we see that change happening where instead of it being just like, okay, what are our 6 big things that we care about this year as a brand? It's every meeting, every decision, every conversation, every debate. Me and Charlie were debating about some tactics earlier. I would love to be able to go out to our customers, which is much harder because they're B2B, and just ask them and figure it out in that meeting or mine data we already have so we can have an answer without having to, use gut feel or guesswork.
Yeah, and I think the removal of gut feel in decision making, it's not like you have to completely rely on data, but it should always be multiple data sources. And I think there was a pursuit of the democratization of research and insight over the last 10 or 15 years with software, but it hasn't really worked. A lot of research and insights teams within these brands are kind of like the gatekeepers of knowledge and information. So you're reliant on people really effectively coming to them with problems, then them having the time and energy to be able to solve them, and then that information flowing through. Whereas if you can get the accessibility, as you said, you can get the speed up, you can get the cost down, and you can protect that research, the fundamentals of good market research, you should be able to, from the most junior to the most senior person, have everything we know to be true, that one source of truth for decision making. Or if there are unique custom problems you're facing, the ability to get that quickly without the need of being a research expert, without the big budgets that a big brand needs, I think that will transform how marketing decisions are made. And I think that the ultimate goal here is that you have better products for people that is more personalized. So in the advertising world, there's obviously a lot of advertising that's become hyper personalized, and you're kind of going, this phone must be listening to me because how could I possibly have this ad that personalized? I think it has to follow on the brand creations side, and how we connect with people should be rooted in the problems people have, how do they feel? And I just don't think there's enough. And as I said, our goal, if we're successful, is to elevate research to being the thing that everyone does as a default, rather than kind of something that's going, we don't have 20 grand to spend on that project. We're the experts, we can just make this decision. And that happens far too often in our minds.
Yeah, well, thank you both so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to see all that you innovate on in the marketing space and how many more insights we can get. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.